Flyers in action with a win over the Devils. A little sweep.
They did. They swept the Devils.
And your boy Prosner, who you said the Flyers would have been better if they called you to play defense, not only put the biscuit in the basket, he was out there on the PK.
Well, I would have been on the PK and probably scoring 2 goals. So how about that?
Yeah, okay. Kevin Durso covered it. And, of course, he covers the Flyers for 97.3 ESPN.com. And he joins us now on the Sports Bash Boardwalk Honda Hotline and on the video stream at 97.3 ESPN.com. There he is. Kevin Durso, what's up, man?
What's up, guys? Happy Friday.
It is a happy Friday when, of course, the Flyers pick up the win and they get 2 in a row. But, man, you're watching that game closely last night, as I know everybody really was, and said, what the heck was going on for 2 periods there? And it was just ugly stuff. They get the goal from Prosser, but my gosh, that defense is still a mess.
Yeah, it is, and especially for the first 2 periods of that game, it was really the whole situation was a mess. But at the same time, it's really hard to single out just the defenseman in this case. It's not just the defenseman, it's the forwards as well. And it's really noticeable how little support they have from the forwards to help the defenseman with simple plays. I mean, there's so much space between the forwards and the defenseman on certain situations that it just makes it more difficult to connect on a pass or to get a clean breakout. And they were doing better at some of those things as the game went on. I think really you saw in the third period how effective they can be when they have clean breakouts, when they make the smart and simple play, and when they play with some energy. But it was really a struggle for 2 periods. And there was a lot of things about those first 2 periods that were completely unacceptable.
Yeah, and I know that you're playing the Devils, who are, they're playing well this year, but they're not regarded as a very good team coming in. But what I want to ask you is, even though they don't have a lot of offensive firepower, the night that Hart had and how he played in that game, that I don't want to say maybe it looked like a turning of the corner a little bit, but I heard you, in the pregame with Josh the other night talking about, how well Elliott had played and that, Hart had not been playing well. Well, last night he played maybe his best game of the year.
Yeah, I think so. And it was really necessary for him to have that kind of game. I had told Josh last night that I felt like he was excited for the opportunity that's what Tuesday off gave him. It gave him a chance to sit on that game from Saturday, to want to be better and to be motivated for it. And I think he definitely was up to the task for everything. He was outstanding in the first 2 periods. That one goal that he allowed, you could question whether that was on him. He said it was more on him. He's got to play it better. You could question whether or not Eric Gustafsson got a piece of that or maybe just took away a bit of an angle for him. But regardless, beyond that, he was outstanding. He made a lot of great saves. I think about the opportunities that the Devils got. One was for Andreas Janssen in that second period where he stacks the pads, and another one where they come up the ice. At one point in time, they got a 4-on-1, and Jack Hughes is the guy who gets the puck, and he's pretty scary when he gets the puck at this point because he's really growing quickly into a top player for this team. And Hart's up to the task again. It felt like he was just in the right position all the time. I had told Josh last night, it wasn't like he was miles away from what he was the year before and things like that. He's just a tick off maybe with some fundamentals or positioning. I don't think he was off on anything last night. He was outstanding from top to bottom.
Yeah, 2 things stood out to me in that third period. It's AV's commitment to the fourth line with Aube, Cabell, Raffle, and Bunneman, and Claude Giroux's emotion. I thought that really showed. So what are your thoughts on those 2?
Well, the fourth line was outstanding in this game, and I really have to commend the play of Connor Bunneman because since he's been thrown into the lineup, I think he's done a really great job being in that role. It's a role that fits him really well. It fits his style well. It fits his size well. So he does a lot of good things in that role. And they've gotten big goals over the years from Michael Raffle and guys like that. Nick Aube-Kubel last year had a few really big ones too. And they're guys who, when they can step up and deliver in that way, that could be the ticket to a win if you get those guys to contribute in that way. And on a night when Alain Vigneault was not very happy with the top 2 lines by any stretch, and he kind of called them out after the game, that's why he started the third period with that fourth line. They were back on the ice 2 minutes into the period. That's when they scored a goal, and they were on the ice constantly throughout the period. And instead of kind of favoring your top 2 lines or your top 3 lines as the period goes on and you're trying to play shut down and finish off the win, it was the opposite. They were shutting down with the fourth line on the ice because that was the most effective line for them. And in terms of Giroux, I think Giroux got the payoff finally on a goal. We thought he had one in Boston last week, and it turned out to not be his goal. It was deflected, but he finally gets the payoff, and his emotion in this game, that is where he steps up as a leader to that sense because they were not getting a lot of calls in the first 2 periods, and they were struggling to put some things together, and his frustration boiling over there a little bit helps the team get a little bit of fire going into the third period. So I think that all those things put together set the stage for what was probably one of the best periods the Flyers have played in the last 3-4 games.
Kevin Durso covers the Flyers. Let's kind of go through, though, from your perspective, why was Prosser there? What was the message? And then he played pretty well. I mean, he's not a long-term solution, obviously, but why was he there? What was the message? Because for people who are not aware, Nate Prosser is a guy who's a journeyman, basically an older guy, and hasn't played the league in a couple of years. It was very surprising to see that he was even on the roster, let alone on the ice, and scored a goal, for God's sakes.
Yeah, I texted Broads last night about this, that I had told Josh he's a stay-at-home defenseman. He doesn't activate too often. And then look at where he is in the first period. He's 9 minutes into the game, his first game in 2 years in the NHL. And he's up on the play right by the crease, putting home a rebound. It's, that was the last guy I expected to score last night for sure. But the reason he was there is because there are messages being sent at this point. And I think that it really goes back to the Saturday game against Boston when Eric Gustafsson had a really rough game, and he'd had probably a couple to that point leading into that. But then he's the guy who comes out of the lineup, and Shane Gostisbehere is ready to come back in. So Gostisbehere goes in on Tuesday and plays. After the Tuesday game, they're still not liking some of the things they're seeing. So now it's Mark Friedman's out, Robert Haig's out, and you keep Gostisbehere in, Gustafsson goes back in, and you bring in a guy like Prosser who is really far down the line in terms of the depth chart. I mean, you can take, it's interesting because sure, Phil Myers is out right now, and you had Gostisbehere out for the stretch of time because of the COVID situation that he was in. But when you have Gostisbehere back and he's available, and the only guy who's unavailable is Myers, you would assume that you could come up with the other 6 guys pretty easily. I mean, they had 8 on the roster to begin with. So this is a pretty clear message that they're going to bring in another guy who is at best the 9th option. We have to dress 6 in a game, but he's the 9th guy in line who would get thrown into a lineup. And you're going to do that over guys who play on a regular basis, guys like Haig, guys like Gustafsson, and Gustafsson played last night, like I said, but still he's been out of the lineup for a game too. So very clearly you're putting a guy in who you think, I thought it was interesting because Alain Vigneault said before the game, he just thought he was going to get a simple game out of him, with a veteran approach to it, but simple and effective plays from him. And that's exactly what you got from him, because not only does he score the goal, but he plays 4 minutes on the penalty kill. He logged 13 good minutes of ice time, and it wasn't, he's on the pair with the lowest ice time at the end of the night, but they're important minutes, especially the penalty kill ones, because he didn't give up a power play goal in the game. So he obviously did his job in that regard. And for the most part, I was impressed with his game considering he hadn't played at that level in 2 years. He was certainly not your issue in this game, and that's a interesting thing to see, because now you got to make a decision going into the weekend with the Islanders coming up. Do you keep Prosser in the lineup? What's Phil Myers' status at this point? Because AV had said he's real close at this point, so it's kind of trying to come down to whether or not Myers is available. Do you keep Prosser in? Do you keep other guys like Haig and Friedman out? There's a lot of decisions for this team to make, and I think that anybody who is on the wrong end of that decision needs to pay some close attention to it, because there's a reason why they're not playing.
Yeah, I think if Prosser continues to play this way, I mean, you at least have to give him another opportunity, because he did play strong enough. How do you assess Joel Farabee and Nolan Patrick to this point? Because Joel Farabee started out with 4-point night, and then he kind of died out. He had a goal the other night in the third period, which was huge. And Nolan Patrick, same thing, scored in game 1 with a nice, it just hit off of him, but hey, they don't ask how. But same with him. Like, how do you assess these two guys?
Well, it's a little harder with Nolan Patrick because of how long it was since he played. But, there were a couple moments, I think really specifically in the Boston games, that I just didn't like from him at all. Otherwise, the first 4 games of the season when they played the 2 against Pittsburgh, the 2 against Buffalo, I thought he was fine for, what he had to do and trying to kind of get adjusted to a game again. And he kind of picked that back up against the Devils a little bit. Now, he was on one of those lines that kind of got the ire of AV last night, that was not among the ones that were performing the way that they thought they should. And that'll allow me to transition nicely to Joel Farabee, who was on one of the lines who AV praised at the end of the game, talking about Scott Lawton's line, which has Farabee and Oscar Lindblom on it. And that's another line that just came in and delivered with a lot of energy. Farabee, you could, from the very beginning, I think was 2 minutes into the game, you turned the speed on in the neutral zone, got Ty Smith flat-footed, he falls over, you get a couple good shots good chances out of that, just because of the fact that he used that speed well. So his energy level picked back up, I think, over the last 2 games because of that. He's really gotten more opportunities. I think that goal really got him going too, because now he's gotten the payoff for something. So it's still a process with him because he's only in his second season, but he's going to be leaned on to be a big part of the offensive side. And now that he finally got back there 2 games ago and had another pretty strong game last night as well, I think that he is on his way to doing, more bigger and better things in the games to come.
All right, we'll end with this and get a look at the injury situation, as we know the Flyers do have a bunch of injuries, but how are they looking there? Because obviously they need some of these injured guys back, mainly Couturier and the situation with him. Frost, who replaced him, he's out as well, we know. And also on defense, who am I forgetting? Myers, yes.
Well, I'll start with the easy one because Myers is closing in on coming back. We just don't know exactly when. I think that I think the timeline that matches up the best is probably the Wednesday game coming up against Boston next week. The weekend's going to be a little questionable. They didn't practice today. They had a day off. So, they had a day off, but Phil Myers was on the ice earlier today for a little bit of a skills session. So he's continuing to try to push to get back. I don't know if he's going to be in tomorrow. It might be a little too soon to assume that, but maybe Sunday. And if not, I think Wednesday's probably on the table for him. Couturier is going to be a little bit more longer term than that. Alain Vigneault said the other day that his injury status, he still thinks he's a couple of weeks away. And, that still gives you a little bit of an uphill battle to fight because of the fact that you rely on him so much for the defensive side. He can contribute on the offensive side as he's proven, being the reigning Selke Trophy winner. And he's a hard guy to replace, but you're going to have to continue to find a way to do that. And there's really nothing to talk about with Frost at this time. He was just out indefinitely from the beginning. The good news for this team is that, there was a moment in last night's game where Oscar Lindblom took a stick to the midsection, or kind of took a hit off the boards that turned out to be a shoulder, and everybody was worried it was a midsection injury or something like that, and he was back out for his next shift. So they're kind of weathering the storm right now because at least it's not starting to pile up any further than what it was. You have those 3 guys out. Myers is really getting close at this point, so you'll be back to having 2 guys out, one who really is the significant piece there, and that might be the only guy you're without for right now. So it's a good sign that they have some of the injuries turning the corner a little bit, but they're not quite there yet. So they've got to still find a way to improve a lot of the other things. And the execution is probably the biggest thing because it's, I thought Alain Vigneault said something really telling last night when it was about, it's on the players to come in with the right mindset to execute and to compete. And if we're not seeing the performance that we think we expect, it's on the players at that point in time. And Alain Vigneault really, set the bar with that one. So without Sean Couturier, without Phil Myers for now, maybe they have him back this weekend or mid next week. Without those 2 guys, you got to find a way. And lucky for them so far, at 5-2-1, they're finding a way to win games, even though it doesn't look the best.
All right, he's Kevin Durso, and don't forget the Flyers and the Islanders. Of course, the Islanders knocked the Fly Guys out of the playoffs last year. They will get a chance back-to-back, Saturday, Sunday, and you can hear the game tonight, Saturday night on 97.3 ESPN, 7 o'clock. Kevin_Durso. Follow him on Twitter. And, of course, he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. All right, Kevin, take care, man.
Thanks, guys. You too.
All right, there he goes. Our Flyers insider, Kevin Durso, on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline.